Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam, folks. I'm so excited today to be joined by Mr. Mike Kelly, longtime voice of the Missouri Tigers. He's also the Senior Vice President for HM Risk, if I'm not mistaken. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Billy, thanks for the invitation. And after the very nice email you sent to me, there was no way that I could say no to the opportunity to spend some time with you today. So let me begin there. Thank you for the very kind words on my work. I sincerely appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate your time here as well today. I want to start off with first, how have you been handling this pandemic? I mean, this is something that has impacted our lives both personally and professionally this last year. So, how have you been handling this whole situation?
It's a great question, and I think each and every one of us have had a different approach, and candidly, I've tried to learn from others. Right? I work in an organization full time that we have 145 employees. We've been operating remotely since mid March. Um, I'm a social person. I love to see people. Um, and that's been difficult, not seeing people. So I've tried to, with employees, I've tried to communicate with them. I've tried to just reach out to them, see how they're doing. Personally, I've tried to, you know, find opportunities to continue to kind of live life as God intended us all to live it, and to try to find time to enjoy yourself. Um, but then also trying to be as responsible as you can when it comes to wearing the face mask and socially distancing and things like that. I mean, the one thing we know, right, is that the pandemic is kind of like playing hide and go seek. You just never know when you're going to get tagged. And so, knock on wood, by the grace of God, I haven't had to deal with it. Nobody in my family has had to deal with it. I've got three daughters that are located literally around the country, one in Los Angeles, one in Chicago, and one who would normally be in New York. But she's here with us right now because of the impact the pandemic's had on New York City. So, you know, I know I'm long-winded, but just really trying to just be smart, but also trying to enjoy life.
For sure. And I just have to ask you, I mean, you're a unique broadcaster in the sense that in addition to your job as the voice of the Mizzou Tigers, I mean, you run this insurance company. How do you do it? I mean, I feel like it's just got to be a lot of work.
Well, I don't run it, but I'm part of the team that works, very diligently at trying to do things each and every day. It's called managing time, right? Fortunately, from a broadcasting standpoint, I've been doing that long enough that I know how to I know the amount of time that I need to prepare for games. I know the amount of time that it takes for me to actually physically do the games, and so I'm able to schedule things around that. I work with a number of wonderful people that um, understand. I think that there's a value add to my role that comes with the company, or that helps the company. And so it's just it's more time management, and it's I'm been doing this for a number of years now, so you just kind of get used to it.
And I was interested to read, Mike, that your formative years in broadcasting were at KMOX Radio and you had an opportunity to work with the legendary Jack Buck. I was wondering, what's the best piece of advice he gave you?
So much, Billy, and I refer to him as Mr. Buck to this day. Um, I sat down with him to do a Cardinals baseball game, and I'll never forget. I thought that I had arrived at the ballpark early, and he was already in the booth, and he spins around in his chair, and he looks at me and he says, "Kid, once you've done one, you've done more than most people." And that's a moment I'll remember. He also reminded me at that point in time, "Hey, don't call me Mr. Buck. It's Jack, please." Yes, sir, Mr. Buck. But I mean, from a formatting standpoint, it was, call the play. I mean, in radio, that's what you're there for, is to call the play. You don't know who's listening. There may be Missouri fans in my case. There may be casual, just fans of basketball that are spinning the dial trying to find out what's going on, or football. Call the play. You are not a referee, so don't spend time officiating the game. You are not a coach, so don't spend time criticizing what the coach is doing during the game, because fans don't want to hear that, because you are not one. What they want to hear is you call the play. And so, you know, the first year that I did play-by-play for Missouri basketball was in 1991, and Joe Buck was actually my color analyst. And his father used to refer to the two of us as the two fledglings. When are you two fledglings going to begin your career? To which I would say one of us is still fledgling. The other guy's had a pretty sensational career himself. So, yeah, Jack was a wonderful human being. He was a very generous human being. He was a guy, though, that Billy was not only generous with his money, he was generous with his time, and generous with his love for others. And that was in the sports office at KMOX at the time, you had Bob Costas, who did things occasionally for us. You had the late, great Dan Kelly. You had Jack Buck. You had Mike Shannon, who still does Cardinal baseball. And Dan Deerdorf was still very active at the time. And so I was really fortunate in the late 80s to be exposed to those individuals.
And you mentioned in 91, you have a chance to work with a young Joe Buck as your first color analyst. What was it like to work with Joe at that time?
You know what? He's always been very gifted, very talented, but I look at it more from a relationship standpoint. We just had a great time. And he's one of those guys that I always knew was going to be extremely, his career was just going to explode once he made the commitment to get into radio and then TV. And Billy, you just think about, well, how do we get better in this craft? You get better by doing it, right? The more games you do, the better you're going to be. But in Joe's case, I just think about the amount of times that just through osmosis, he was able to learn about not only broadcasting, but the game, right? The game of baseball or football, just from hanging out with his dad. I mean, people don't realize how good of a broadcaster, how good of a football broadcaster Jack Buck was. One of the things I used to love is, St. Louis is about 120 miles from Columbia, Missouri. And so, on Monday nights when I'd drive up to do the coaches shows in Columbia, driving home and listening to Monday Night Football, and listening to Jack when he was doing Monday Night Football, and worked with Hank Stram at the time, and now listening to Kevin Harlan do the games. I mean, that was something that I'll always remember, because both of those guys have taught me a lot about, how we do this thing.
And, you've been with the Mizzou Tigers since 1994 as the full-time voice. What are some of your favorite memories covering the team? I mean, for football, they played in a number of big bowl games. I'm sure there's a lot of other defining wins for the program. Basketball, the team has been a regular participant in the NCAA tournament, has made a few Elite Eight runs. I mean, what stands out to you in your time at Mizzou?
You think back to the coaches that you've worked with. Gary Pinkel in football is to this day still a dear friend. The late great Larry Smith. I miss him very dearly. The players that have come along, in both sports. Norm Stewart in basketball was a guy who, again, still a dear friend, and a guy who treated me, extremely well when I first had the opportunity in '91 to start doing basketball. And you remember the players, but the thing you remember, I think you remember, aside from the games, you just remember watching kids, right, make plays. That's what college athletics is. It's about kids making plays. And whether it's, Tyus Edney going the length of the court in Boise, Idaho with 4.8 seconds to play to beat Missouri and advance UCLA into the regional semifinals and then eventually into the national championship, or whether it be Chase Daniel throwing a touchdown pass late in a game against the University of Kansas that would ultimately result in Missouri becoming the number one team in the country in football. It's kids making plays. And throughout the course of that time, you watch guys that come in and you watch them mature and you watch them grow, and you see not only how they improve on the field, but you just watch and see what they do afterwards. And now I've been fortunate enough to watch, to call the games of guys who now have kids that are playing in college, and seeing what just, you thought they were good people when they were there, and then you kind of realize that not only were they good people and good players, but they're also become good fathers, good husbands, and things like that. And so that's been very rewarding, to say the least.
And I have to ask you, and hopefully you don't mind me asking this question about one game in particular. In 2012, the March Madness tournament, Norfolk State, a number 15 seed, upset Mizzou. At the time was a number 2 seed. I mean, as a broadcaster, how do you process that moment, that type of upset? And how do you just go about going on air and just those couple days afterwards?
Well, I think what you do is you just, again, you go back to the basics. It's call the play and describe what happens. And I remember that game vividly. I remember also the shoot around that morning vividly, in Omaha, in a side gym off of the main arena. And it just had a field, just a strange feeling during the pregame warmup. Here was this team that, was a 2 seed that had just won the Big 8 conference tournament and had 30 wins in the season, but there was something not right that day, watching them go through shoot-arounds. And then, you knew that, guys like Kyle O'Quinn and others on Norfolk State were capable basketball players. And Missouri just had one of those days. The thing that saved Missouri more than anything from a national perspective is that later that night, Duke, as a 2 seed, also got beat. And so that kind of shifted the national attention to more what had taken place with the Blue Devils. But, when things like that happen, whether it be a kickball in 1997, the flea kicker, as it was called, when Missouri had Nebraska on the ropes, had a chance to knock off the eventual national champions. The Edney game in '94, the game you referred to, you just have to call the play. And you have to be honest with your listeners about what exactly has taken place. And there's no way to sugarcoat it when it's a bad loss.
For sure. And I was wondering, how do you prepare for a game? And let's just say you've got a Mizzou football game on Saturday. How are you preparing the week leading up to the game? And how does that differ for basketball?
Football, I think, is a little bit more of an intensive amount of preparation, just because of the number of people that could or could not be on the field at any one time. Generally, what I will do is the Sunday before the game, I will pull off game notes from the opponent from their previous game and start working off those documents to prepare two deeps and things like that. I use Adobe InDesign to do my flip cards. Others have used other programs. This is just something that's worked well for me. So I generally try to get the template done with the two deep by Sunday afternoon, and in that will be information such as team stats, individual size, weight, class, experience, and then also individual numbers, stats and things like that. Want to have that done by Sunday afternoon, and then update it when the teams release their updated two deep as you get into the game week. Fortunately, there's so many games that are televised, and back when I first started doing this, it was hard to find opponents, and you'd have to rely on the video people to give you DVD tape, or not DVDs, but VHS tapes, so you could watch the opponent. Now there's so many games on TV, and there's access through things like Huddle and things like that. And so I try to watch at least a couple of games. And for me, it's not as much schematics as it is just learning personnel, right? And seeing what different things you may see on Saturday when it comes to their approach from an offensive standpoint, or from a defensive standpoint. And so then kind of work through those notes and prep as it goes. And then there's other things that come into play with football because we have a longer pregame show, and there's certain elements that I have to add to the pregame show, different interviews and conversations and little pieces. And so that's kind of how that works. Basketball is a little bit different in that it doesn't take as long. It takes me about 2 hours to prepare for each game, just because my notes are I try to have career information on each guy. I try to have season information on each guy, and then also individual notes about each individual, so I have it in case I need to refer to. But that's kind of the process that I've worked out through the years.
What are some of your favorite stadiums to broadcast from in both football and basketball around the country? And certainly in the SEC, you've got the cream of the crop getting to play some incredible competition.
Well, yeah, I mean, from a football standpoint, Bryant-Denny in Tuscaloosa is special. Sanford Stadium in Athens, the Swamp in in Florida, Neyland Stadium, and you could go on, right? Um, I had a chance to do a Cotton Bowl game at the AT&T Stadium in Arlington. That was pretty special. Being able to do basketball games at Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, certainly Rupp Arena, are a couple of buildings that stand out. Um, did a Sweet 16 game and an Elite Eight game um, in Phoenix at the Cardinals indoor stadium there. And then of course, doing baseball at Busch Stadium was something that you'll always remember too. So, yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed to be able to see a lot of different things.
I don't wanted to ask you, Mike, specifically for college football, do you think the game has a parity problem? I mean, especially with the implementation of the college football playoff, if you really feel like it's been Alabama, Clemson, you sprinkle in another team or two like Ohio State, and a lot of other programs like a Virginia Tech, like Missouri, haven't really been able to break through. And it's funny because in the BCS era, you really felt like the SEC was kind of like blamed for a lot of the lack of parity. Do you see that argument in college football? And if so, any way to remedy it?
Yeah. The way to remedy is win, right? Shut up and win. I mean, honestly, I get the conversation, but I also think that is it Alabama's fault that they have a platform in which that they can recruit on a national level? You can say the same about Notre Dame too. You can say the same about others. Clemson certainly has built that. Under Dabo Sweeney. It kind of is like, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, Billy, is the teams that claim that they've been snubbed by the NCAA selection committee. Oh, I can't believe every team that plays college basketball is eligible for the NCAA tournament. Just win, right? Shut up and win. If you're good enough, you're going to go there. And so I don't have as much, I think, sympathy for some of that some of that dialogue as maybe others do.
For sure. Well, I wanted to ask you about a couple of different athletes you've gotten to cover during your time at Mizzou. And if you have a personal story or maybe a memory on the field that you can remember about them, please let me know. But what about the best Michael Porter Jr. stories? Pretty good player in the NBA with a good team in the Nuggets.
Yeah, honestly, I really didn't get a chance to spend much time with Michael. He played 4 games that year. He played um, he played the opening night against Iowa State, and then literally shut it down after that, and didn't return until the SEC tournament. Missouri was one and done then, and then he played in the NCAA tournament, and so I really didn't get a chance to spend a great deal of time and get to know him. I know his father. Obviously, Mike Senior had been on the staff at Missouri working for his sister-in-law, Robin Pinchton, who's the women's basketball coach. But I mean, a funny, I guess, if you will, Michael Porter Jr. story is that I was walking into the lower level of Mizzou Arena, and he was walking in the hallway in front and didn't have a shirt on, and somebody said to him, "Hey man, you got to put your shirt on." And he turned around and looked at the strength coach. He said, "Not when you look this good." So he was obviously, confident young man on and off the court. But it's neat to see him have the success. I mean, particularly because of the health things that he went through during his 1 year at Missouri, and so hopefully he'll continue to be able to stay healthy and have a long, very significant career in the NBA.
What about Jordan Clarkson? He's doing pretty well at the Jazz, a front runner for the Sixth Man of the Year award this year.
Yeah, Jordan's a kid that I will tell you this: when he was at Missouri, he didn't have as many tattoos as he has now. So he's been able to use that NBA money to also work on body art a little bit. But really good guy. Nice guy that I can remember after he transferred from Tulsa. Just seeing him during that transfer year, really working on his game, prior to games, that Missouri was going to play in. And then, just seeing him have the ability to take over games at times was something that I'll remember. But just, the thing with Jordan that I'll remember is just a likable guy, just a very sincere, genuine young man who, again, you're happy to see have success.
What about Chase Daniel? He was a Heisman Trophy finalist during his time at Mizzou, and he won a Super Bowl, I believe, as Drew Brees' backup.
Yeah, he did. He's got more Super Bowl rings than Dan Marino. Think about that. Uh, Very mature guy from a very early age. Very much a leader from the time that he walked onto campus. A guy who just, again, very genuine. He and I did a thing. In fact, early in the pandemic, I think it was in June, we did a fundraiser for the food bank of Central and Northeast Missouri, where we got together his teammates, some of his teammates from that 2017 that won the Cotton Bowl and that beat Kansas and would be number one in the nation for a short amount of time. And Chase was able to pull all those guys together. He and I did a little Zoom call like this with the ability for people to make donations, and I think we raised about $130,000 for the food bank. And so Chase is a giving individual. He was always considered the smartest guy in the room when it comes to his ability to really just understand the game. And so, yeah, terrific young man who continues to give back to his alma mater.
What about Blaine Gabbert? He was on that team that upset number one Oklahoma in 2010.
Yeah, Blaine is a guy that just a world of talent, big guy, big arm, really, really neat family. He, after Missouri's last game, Chase's senior year, I think it was in the Cotton Bowl, or not the Cotton Bowl, it was in San Antonio, and walking back from the San Antonio Dome and seeing Blaine. I was actually walking back to the hotel with him, and at that point in time, he knew it was his team and was already focused on taking over. And so neat to see him get a chance to win a Super Bowl too, and obviously as a backup to Brady in Tampa Bay. But just a guy that had an unbelievable amount of talent and a huge arm, and a guy that his teammates respected a great deal.
Mike, what's your advice to young sportscasters, aspiring sportscasters who want to make it in this field, especially during this pandemic? I mean, you know better than anyone, it's already a competitive field, and now we have to deal with the realities of the coronavirus. So what's your advice to young guys and girls like me who want to make it in the field of sports broadcasting?
Billy, I think you've got more opportunities than we did because of the way that this whole digital world that we know has exploded. So from podcasts to the ability to do Zoom and things like that. My advice is always take any opportunity you can. Don't judge an opportunity because you don't think it's good enough for you. The way you improve is by performing your craft. Number one. Number two, if it was a young student that was in high school that was thinking about where they're going to go to college or what they're going to study, Bob Costas has always said, and I agree with him, major in life, major in things that really intrigue you, and try to become the best, the most well-rounded person that you possibly can. Because if there's one thing we know from an economic standpoint, there are times that if you go to Red Oaks, Iowa, or you go to a smaller market, you're going to be asked to do more than just whatever it is you want to do, right? In my case, my first job was in Olney, Olney, Illinois. A white squirrel is indigenous to Olney, Illinois. Look it up. It's something you can Google. I was there for literally 3 weeks, and I arrived and I was told that all I was going to do is sports. I didn't know sports. I was jockeying on an AM station where the moniker was the memory maker, hits from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then I would do like a hot hit radio DJ shift in the afternoon. And literally one weekend, I had an opportunity to interview in Champaign, Illinois, and I did, and came back and put in my 2 weeks notice because I had a chance to go from a place I wasn't doing sports to a place where I was going to get a chance to do sports. And so, you have to take advantage of opportunities, but you also have to keep your ears open, because your first job is not going to be your last opportunity. And so I think that would be a piece of advice that I would give individuals. But the other thing too that I'd say is, as an example, don't be demanding in terms of from a financial reward standpoint, um, before you have a chance to get your first job. And what I mean by that is, I was working in Champaign, Illinois. I knew I wanted to go to St. Louis, Missouri. I wanted to work at KMOX. For 2.5 years, I was the correspondent for KMOX Sports on Illinois football and basketball. So anything that happened, I was sending them audio. I was sending them post-game reports. I was doing news stories for them when things happened in Champaign. And I never asked for a dime. Now, what happened is that when there was an opportunity for me to be considered for a position there, they remembered the work that I had done, and they had had a chance to evaluate my work and critique it. And so that led to an opportunity at KMOX. And so I know things are a lot different now than they were, back then, but I'm just saying that, be flexible, don't have demands, be willing to do whatever you can to just continue to pursue your dreams.
My final question for you, Mike, you've been so gracious with your time is, you've been at Missouri for almost 30 years now. You're, like I mentioned, also working in insurance as well with the company. As you reflect on your career, I mean, are you pretty content with how it's played out? I mean, you've done March Madness tournaments, you've called major bowl games. Is there anything you wish you could have done, or all being said, you're pretty content, pretty
No,
happy with how your career's played out?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm satisfied. I am. I mean, so my relationship with Missouri started in 1989, and it started because I was willing on a Monday night to drive from St. Louis to Columbia to host the coaches shows. And then eventually I got the opportunity in 1990 to do color on basketball. Started doing football. I started doing basketball in 91, started doing football in 94. So, you know, I was always just appreciative of the opportunity to do Division I football and basketball. Now, were there other opportunities that I looked at through the years over the last 30 years? Yeah, there were a few. Were there any that I was really serious about? No, not really. Just because I thought that the position that I had, and by the way, I don't call this my job because I'm just a placeholder, right? It's their job. I'm just fortunate to be in the position to do the games. And at some point in time, they're going to tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, thanks, but we're going to move in a different direction," and that's their job. They can do that. But I just think that it's one of those deals that I love the opportunity. I feel blessed to have the opportunity, and so I've been very, very satisfied with the position that others have put me in for the last 30 years.
Mike, this has been such a pleasure getting to talk to you about your Mizzou career and just about all the great people you've interacted with. I can't say how much I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Billy, my best wishes to you and to those that may be watching this, and thank you for reaching out.
That's Mike Kelly, the longtime voice of the Mizzou Tigers, also the senior vice president for HM Risk. This has been the latest edition of The Post with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.